Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a Screenwriter's Rant on Picard Season 2. Yes, everybody else is talking about this, so why shouldn't I throw in my 2 cents about how Patrick Stewart's destroying the Star Trek franchise? Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books, links in the description. Woketards, a novel, Hollywoke, another novel, political satire, and of course the Pineys, books 1 through 6, comedy, horror in South Jersey, book 7 coming out this summer. And don't forget to check out our other 2 videos, right, Little Joan, on Bitchute and Rumble today. Hot take and a news blast, which I hope you will enjoy. Now, why is Paramount S-ing the bed on Star Trek? I don't know. Everything's gone woke, and it's just another thing they're destroying. In this case, a lot of people blame the producer. I think his name's Kurtzman. I've never seen the Picard show. I won't watch it. I'm not going to pay for Star Trek. What are you, out of your mind? Especially, I'm not going to pay for this Star Trek. The original Star Trek's amazing, and this is like, I'm going to pay for that. I barely tolerated TNG. The rest of it, Deep Space Nine, solid. But the rest of it, nah, it's pretty worthless. And this is Kurtzman is his name, who did this this and Star Trek Discovery, otherwise known as Star Trek Diversity, because it's so insufferably woke. But the big news in this one is Q is back. I don't know if you remember Q from Next Generation. These are a bunch of characters that are in the show. Nobody knows who they are except 7 and 9. And Jean-Luc. Let me find Q. Where is Q? There he is. It's good to see Q back. Looking a little older himself. I don't know how they're going to explain that, but, because Q is pretty godlike and can do just about anything. But whether you know or not, at the end of season 1 of Picard dies, and they put his body put his brain or his memories into a synthetic Picard. So it's not actual Picard, which seems to be a theme amongst the very lazy writers right now. They've done that with the X-Men. I think they're all like plant clones or something. They all died and then came back as clones. Like, it's this very lazy writing technique, like the originals don't matter, because ultimately nothing matters to these people, because that's kind of the background of their ideology, whether they realize it or not. It's deconstructing everything. So this is deconstructing Picard, which didn't have enough structure to begin with, in my view. They're assuming that people are following every little detail of this because Star Trek fans are like obsessive and they'll follow anything. Some of them, well, not all of them. A lot of them are out. And now they're going to go back in the timeline, because that's going to be this season. The timelines are falling to pieces, and it's an opportunity. They could fix the show after S in the Bed in the first season, which got mercilessly critiqued all over the internet. Which again, I didn't see, but I saw the clips from, and I saw people analyzing it, especially the critical drinker, who's very good at that. And it just looks like a total train wreck. I wouldn't waste my time. And I certainly wouldn't pay for it. So now the thing, and here's my 2 cents. Here's my actual, contribution to this discussion. As a writer, I've written time travel stuff because I love time travel. God, I can't get enough of it, which is telling that I won't even watch this, even though I watch almost everything time. If you put a time travel thing in your storyline, I'll almost always watch it, but it only works under a very specific condition. The first condition, the absolute first condition you need, is you need a stable enough series of events to mess with. Okay? So you need a history that you can dabble in. I just did it with a storyline, which I won't give away, which, let's see, is that coming out next? Actually, I can sort of tease it. I'm doing something in the Pineys about that, because I've established a very strong timeline if you read the Pineys. And the timelines that I mess with in the Pineys are very basic, right? It's stuff that you can relate to. And I also make fun of that kind of genre as well. But the thing is, you have to have a solid enough series of events, a history of the show. And regular Star Trek did. And you could argue Next Generation basically did. And even Deep Space Nine, I would say, did. But when you get to Enterprise, it unravels completely. Voyager, kind of. I guess Voyager, you could say, was still in that realm when most of the continuity was fine. But Enterprise completely unraveled it. First Contact unraveled some of it, because in the original Star Trek, the guy who invented the warp drive, they show him, number one, and he's not the actor, anything close to the actor they use in Contact. And in that timeline, the original timeline, the guy who invents warp drive disappears because the original crew of the Enterprise discover him on this planet where he's lived for hundreds of years, because he got stuck on this planet and this alien kept him alive, and that's why he's been there so long, and blah, 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 blah. So they didn't make that continuity connection in Contact, really. They kind of blew it up. So this blows up Picard, which already flies in the face of Star Trek in general. Now, the original concept of Star Trek by Gene Roddenberry himself, the creator of the show, is that Earth is already a utopia. That's the point. Like the Federation and Earth itself, it's a utopia. The point of the show is exploration. New worlds, new frontiers. Earth is fine. Vulcan is fine. Like the Federation planets are great because they're in the very, very civilized part of space. But if you go outside of that, that's where it starts to get dicey. And that's what the show was about. Like it was like a Western in that way. The subsequent storylines started to become degraded during Next Generation. Because first off, Next Generation started during the writer's strike, so they just S the bed in the whole first season. The whole first season is mostly unwatchable. Then they get to a storyline called Conspiracy, I think it was called, where aliens are taking over the Federation by... They literally inhabit the bodies of the humans who run the Federation, or part of them. And they're doing... And they never followed up on the story. That's the worst part. Like, they had this, like, intriguing storyline where the aliens finally infiltrate the Federation, and then they kind of... I think they kind of dropped the ball and never went back to it. But that was the first sort of intriguing episode of Next Generation. Then it finally eventually worked its way back up to, you know, sort of regular Star Trek. But a lot of it was contingent upon character dynamics that had almost nothing to do with the original concept of the series, which is we're exploring new worlds. Strange, you know, things that happen. Like new things. And yes, sometimes they would, but a lot of times they didn't, or it was an episode about, you know, it was too internal. Like, I enjoy this episode, but it's a very internal episode where Worf comes back from a Klingon tournament, and he realizes he keeps getting pushed into alternate universes, and then it ends with a million Enterprises, you know, hailing each other, and Worf trying to get back to his Enterprise, and trying to fix this, you know, this confluence of various worlds. That show could at least, though, despite its flaws and going off the rails of the original Star Trek, it had enough of a history that you could do a time travel episode and make it mostly make sense. And they did a few. You know, they did ones where they went into the future, or, you know, showed you glimpses of the future or past or whatever. This show already S the bed. It introduced a bunch of new characters that nobody cares about. It flies in the face of Next Generation, which already kind of flew in the face of the original Star Trek. And they're too hyped up to push their woke and wonderful agenda to even be bothered with checking about what Star Trek really is, or hiring science fiction writers to write the show, which is what Gene Roddenberry did, right? He hired like the best guys in science fiction to write the episodes. That's why the show is so good. The original show is so good because the writing is so amazing. Whereas the guys they got now, they're just Hollywood a-holes doing their Hollywood a-hole things, right? They can't push enough wokeness in these episodes. That's why it's called Star Trek Diversity, the other show. And they're also hinting at a crossover, which would be hilarious, and I look forward to the Critical Drinkers review of that. So, if you are a writer and you're doing a time travel thing, you have to make the original timeline strong enough so you can play around with the new timeline and set it back to right, because the audience has to perceive a right timeline to begin with. They have to perceive how it could be changed. And you have to be, like with the Pineys, I had to limit myself on who gets changed, right? I couldn't make it so all-encompassing that it just unraveled everything. There's a timeline there that had to be preserved, and a history that had to be preserved. And it's one the readers should get even just by reading that particular book, because it's very basic. You could do the same thing with Star Trek and Star Trek Picard. The problem is it's already too complicated. Now, first off, you got 7 and 9 here, who's a Borg, or was a Borg, a former Borg. And the big revelation is she gets up and she doesn't have the metal thing on her head, which isn't a big revelation when you consider it takes place so far in the future. They could certainly get rid of her Borg implants. In fact, like, the question is, why didn't they do it sooner? But there you go. The people of this show don't understand what makes Star Trek fun and unique and watchable. They're just relentlessly pushing their agenda, which is, women are good. They made 7 and 9 gay. She wasn't gay in the Next Gen, or no, that was Voyager she was introduced on. They also, as Critical Drinker points out, say that there's a relationship between her and Picard, but they never interacted while their TV shows were on. And in fact, Next Generation was off the air, I believe, when Voyager went on the air, right? I don't think they were overlapping at all at that point. I think Next Generation had been off the air for a while. It had been Next Generation, then DS9, and then Voyager. So, they create relationships that aren't there because they just assume everybody knows them. Because we're all in Star Trek, and therefore, obviously she would know. Because everybody in Star Trek knows everyone, right? This is a dilettante's version of what Star Trek is. It's supposed to be about science fiction. It's supposed to be exploring new things. And the woke nonsense isn't smart, right? And you could explore that in the show, but it's stupid. It's all stupid and all race-based anyway. So, and it has nothing to do with the Federation. The Federation was way beyond that. And in fact, you could point to the original Star Trek. Remember the Frank Gorshin episode, where half black, half white episode? Great episode, right? I won't give it away, but for those of you who've seen it, you know the ending, and it's an amazing ending. If you didn't pick up on it, and I didn't when I was a kid and I watched it, I was like, oh my God, mind blown! What an ending! And but this show doesn't have that kind of nuance at all. It's hammering you over the head. And I talk about Harlan Ellison and Star Trek, and that story he always tells about the script he wrote. And one of the scripts, he wrote The City on the Edge of Forever, and then got into a row with Roddenberry over it because Roddenberry rewrote it, as he did every episode of the show. And because Harlan had things like people taking drugs, the Federation going to execute a guy on this planet. It was like elements that never appeared in the show Bible, which had to be consistent, right? If you wanted a continuity. Harlan wanted to show all this corruption and greed and horribleness. It just wasn't part of the Federation, as Roddenberry envisioned it. But now that's all they do on the show. Now you do have drug addicts and executions. Like the drinker showed clips in his rant about it, and all he showed were people like lying. One of the characters is a drug addict, and then a bunch of people killing people and shooting up the place with phasers, which isn't even all that interesting because they're phasers and they're fake, right? It's different when you watch a gunfight, which is kind of cool because you can kind of imagine a gunfight, but phasers are a made-up weapon, not nearly as cool, and quite frankly, far devastating. In the original series, they're incredibly devastating weapons that could do amazing amounts of damage. I mean, they could do a lot of things. They would vaporize people, absolutely vaporize them. And in the old show, it was like, you're gone, baby. In the new Star Trek, you like explode and then blood goes everywhere. That's just, first off, that's just gross, number one. Second off, this takes place after Next Generation, which takes place way after the original Star Trek. So you're talking like years and years into the future. The technology would only get better. So you wouldn't have blood going all over the place, no matter where you set the phaser, right? You would make it a very clean kill if that's what you wanted. Are you telling me that these characters are so messed up? They're like, oh, I want this guy to explode. Let me set my phaser on making people explode. So, but again, the showrunners on this show are so caught up in their agenda and their own narcissism, I think, they don't consider any of those factors. This is a writer show. Star Trek is a writer show. It's one where the writer absolutely has to be paramount, pardon the pun. And if he's not, well, then it's very easy for this to go completely out of whack. And you got Q. Q could literally come in there and go, okay, Picard, you're human again. The timeline's different. You never died. Let me fix the timeline. There you go. That's who Q is. He's a godlike being. That was the whole point of him. So, did you even watch the original Next Generation series? I don't even think these guys could sit through it because I've worked with these guys and they can't. They can't sit through anything. They can't read anything. They just don't care. It's all about them. And that's why I wouldn't watch this show. And in fact, it looks terrible. I'm giving it a very, very rare downvote. Good luck, Trekkies. I feel for you, but I'm out.